So it's so nice to see so many of you that I knew from way back when I was Vice President of Membership at FEI as well. And it's been quite a while, but it's so nice to be back home in a number of ways. So thank you for having me in. I am kind of a serial entrepreneur, and most of you know me from my first entrepreneur venture, which was the Johnsson Group, and I founded that over 25 years ago. And they're still part of SALO, which is kind of interesting, and I'm so happy to see like people that had been employees of mine way back when still there, right? And so many out into the workplace and everything else too. So it's just the finance community in Chicago has always been a very welcoming place, I've found, and so it's kind of nice to come home and talk to you guys. Thank you. I'm talking about entrepreneurship, and I wanted to start with just some things that, this might be even an interesting article for you guys, but it's the Wall Street Journal on November 28th of 2016, published this whole study by Harvard Business, landing a good job in later life. And as I look around the room, I would love a show of hands, how many of you are age 50 plus? Right? Which to get to a senior level in finance, you know, you're not at a senior level in finance at age 20 plus, right? But what's interesting, and I've been going to a number of future of work conferences. I was just at one last week by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. I was at one about a month ago by the Atlantic magazine, and I'm being told by these senior economists who are age 30 that the future of work is the gig economy, and that by year 2020 is the earliest prediction, some of them by year 2030, that 40 to 50% of our economy, or 40 to 50% of the workforce, will be earning the majority of their compensation in the gig economy, right? And that's good news and bad news. It kind of means the end of the job, and it kind of means the beginning of the future. And I don't know if I believe those numbers or not, but these are numbers that I do believe, right? And these numbers are about entrepreneurship. And so number 5 in the bits in this article about landing a good job in later life is number 5, the chance to be an entrepreneur has passed me by, right? And the facts are this: Americans aged 50 to 60 years old are now, and this is from the Kauffman Foundation, are now 24% of all startups. And that's from year 2015, the last number on that. And that's versus only 15% for those in the age group of 24 to 35. So we think of 24 to 35 as being when you should be an entrepreneur. And in fact, not only are there more age 50 plus starting businesses, but they are more successful. The stats for a long time have been 80% of new businesses fail in the first year, right? And that in 2005 was 75% were failing in the first year. But out of the age group of 55 to 64, where is it here? 70% of those startups were still around 3 years later. So what happens is that when you have a career, when you have a whole history of learning experiences and work experiences, you have an awful lot to offer to the rest of the world in an entrepreneurial way, all right? And we are the most successful at the startups, and I'll just remind you all, who do you think is the largest minter of millionaires in the world? How many think it's Microsoft? Raise your hand. How many think it's McDonald's? All right, well, I gave you the answer. It is McDonald's, all right? McDonald's is the largest minter of millionaires in the world, and when Ray Kroc kind of founded the concept of to franchise it and everything else, he was 55, right? Colonel Sanders, when he started shopping his fried chicken recipe to restaurants and trying to get them to sell it, right? And instead ended up launching his own businesses, was 60 years old, right? And we look at those, and those are billion-dollar organizations, right, that were founded by people in their 50s and 60s. Now, the first entrepreneur I ever worked for who put me through college, he was 55 when he started his own business, and he was an architect, a degree out of U of I, working in his career, but he had 5 kids. And 3 of them were sons, and he had enough money to send them through college, but the 2 girls wanted to go to college also, and he didn't have enough money in the job he was in, so he started his own business. And that, when we just come to the last stats I want to share with you, which are the reasons why those age 50 to 65 start businesses. 32% say it's for the independence. right? They're tired of working for somebody else and having a job that lasts for 3 years and then they have to find another job. 27% said is to pursue interests and passions that they hadn't had a chance to pursue at any other point in time in their career. And I can tell you that's been the truth for me. When I started my first business, I was manager of planning at Kraft, and I kept trying to start a business on the side, and I was just too tired. I mean, I gave 150% to my job, and I could never get something started until I quit and made that my job, right? So the time to think about that is certainly when you're in transition. Only 4% of people said that it was because there were no jobs available. And also in our age group, 24% said that it was as an income supplement. All right, and all of those are good reasons to start jobs. And one of the other things that start businesses, and one of the other things that I've seen in our age group in particular is that people will pair up and do it together. I have a great story about two married couples who started with their best friends. And it was just a UPS store, right? And now they own many UPS stores, so they bought into a franchise. So I'm going to talk today about startups, and I have taken this, rather than should you do a startup or not, I've taken this with the assumption that you're considering it, right? And you may be considering it, you may not be considering it, but at some point in time, even if you're not considering it, you might know somebody who's considering it. And for the last 4 years, just go a little bit here. First, I wanted to know how many of you are FEI members, but it seems like almost all of you are, right? Okay. And how many of you have ever been an independent contractor before? Okay, that's what I thought, almost all of you. And that's kind of moving towards this gig economy assumption anyways, that all of us will go through these transitions where we are that. How many of you have been in the gig economy in some other way? Sold stuff on eBay, Craigslist, things like that?
Do my kids come?
Close enough, right? How many of you have at least participated as a buyer in the gig economy? You used Uber, yeah? Okay. So we can see that this is growing and growing. And how many of you have been affiliated with a non-financial startup? So I'm assuming if you were an independent contractor, it was in the field of finance and accounting, right? So non-financial startup, can I see your hands? Okay. So that's really where it's the big scary thing, right? Is going out and doing something else, but that's why I brought up McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? Like you could sell a hamburger in a different way. You could make a veggie burger that tastes better than any of the veggie burgers out there and tastes like a hamburger, right? There are all kinds of things that you can do if you decide that you can step outside of the finance and accounting arena, right? So a little bit about my background. I did some of it. Right now, I am in the gig economy again. And every time I have started a business, I've been in the gig economy one way or another. And to me, being an adjunct professor is a gig economy, all right? It's not tenure. I don't have a job for life at any of the universities that I teach at. I have a course that I'm teaching, or I have 2 courses that I'm teaching for a period of time. The longest adjunct professor position that I've had was as a visiting professor while somebody else was taking a sabbatical, and that was for a year in duration, right? But what it's given me is the ability to teach entrepreneurship, and right now I have 4 contracts at one university where I am developing their MBA specialization in entrepreneurship. I'm teaching management and leadership. I'm also helping them get a center off the ground, and that's one of the universities that I work with. I also teach entrepreneurship. I train faculty across the country for National Association of Community Colleges. So I'm teaching online courses to train those faculty. And I also do a lot of volunteer work in this field as well. And what I'm figuring out is how to turn into a science that which has been an art for me for 30 years, right? And the other thing is how to make it experiential. To me, entrepreneurship is like riding a bike. Once you learn how to do it, you can do it over and over again. But that first time, when you first get on a bike, right, you could watch videos, you could read books on it. Nothing is going to teach you how to ride a bike until you get on the bike and ride it, right? And fall off and skin your knees, and then all of a sudden you get that balance and you become better and better at it. So if the economists are right, and that means 50% of us are going to have to be entrepreneurs one way or another, you guys are kind of on the forefront of it. I feel like I've been on the forefront of it for 30 years. So anyways, that just takes you through a little bit. I'm talking proof of concept. And proof of concept is the science of stumbling around and getting a business off the ground. Every entrepreneur that I've ever met has done this in some form or another. And what I have done is created a curriculum around that, starting with Northwestern's MBA program. This is their Entrepreneurship 101 class, brings together a lot of the stuff from Steve Blank out of Stanford University. And I've added entire pieces of it that I have created along the way that I think make more sense. And then I have students that are actually launching businesses by the end of this course. By the end of the course, if you want to get an A, you have to get to first revenue. And what it does is it takes them away from, oh my goodness, is this the business, to can I get any business off the ground, right? So it's not the super bike that they're riding, it's just can I get to revenue? And that's the scariest thing and the hardest thing, and it's why 80% of businesses fail in the first year, is that they don't really get to revenue. They may get one customer, right? Somebody buying something, but it doesn't really become a business. So I'm just going to give you guys an overview to the 10 courses. These are the 10 steps. And I just was training faculty for a foundation. Coleman wrote a grant for it. And I was training trainers that were going to train youth, inner city youth, who a number of them are high school dropouts or at risk of being high school dropouts. And they said, I'm surprised at how easy and how basic the program is. But those of you who know me know that's what I do all the time. I take things that are extremely complex or seem really scary, and I make them easy and simple. So that's what you're going to see, is it's easy and simple. These are basic steps, and you'll be like, wow, why didn't I think of this before when I was an independent contractor, right? So the first thing is this. You have to first define what is the problem that you're seeking to solve. And most of us, when we start out with the business, we're like, this is what I can do, right? We think of ourselves more as we have been in a job, and here's the job that we've done before, here's many jobs we've done before. We think of our inventory of skill sets. And that's just like an engineer that comes to me and says, hey, I created this thing. And I'm like, what is this thing? And they go, well, it does this and this and this. And I said, who needs that done? Right? And they're like, well, a lot of people should want this, right? And I've had classes where I've had 40% of my class be engineers who have created really cool things, you know, really cool technologies and stuff like that. And I make them focus on what is the problem that they are seeking to solve, right? And so if you look at the world as problems to solve, this allows you to get out of finance and accounting as well. There have got to be things that bug you every single day of your life, right? The entrepreneur that I worked for in the construction industry, when he retired, one of the things he hated was driving around as a senior behind other seniors who hadn't turned off their turn signals because they couldn't hear that the turn signal was still on. And so he created a device, he engineered a device that was an amplifier for the turn signals, right? You know, anything like that that you have that is a problem in your life is the place that you can start with a business idea. And from an accounting and finance standpoint, you have all kinds of problems, right? Everybody's having to have leaner organizations. We just came out of tax season, or we're still in tax season. We came out of year-end inventories. We have all of these problems that exist for people in the industry that could become a business that you specialize in, right? And I coached an entrepreneur who started exactly this inventory management business for Walmart, and came out of the finance industry there, and then started this and said, look, I can go and manage your warehouses, I can go and do this, and then by developing that for Walmart, was then able to take it to others in the retail industry as well. Become a specialist is something that is really such a junior job, right? It gets done with people who are not qualified to do the senior level management of it. So I ask you to focus on problems, and I say, is it desirable? Is it accessible? Does it scale extraordinarily? And this is a place where I challenge students all the time. I say, what is it going to look like for it not to be just a sole proprietor, right? Or maybe you want it to be a sole proprietor, especially if it's extra income. But if not, I challenge students to say, how can you get to 1 million consumers? Or how can you get to 1,000 businesses? And that makes you think of something like the Walmart example, and okay, now I'm doing inventory management for all of their operations, and then I'm getting other retailers, and how many retailers are there that are out there, and it moves you beyond you and feeling like, okay, I'm looking to generate an income, and moves you to focus on the customer, right? Spend a lot of time on the definition then of the problem. When you've gotten to the problem, you have to decide what's the pain. And any of you have been through things like Sandler's training, sales training, things like that, know that when you focus on a customer's pain, you get to those who are most likely to have you pay, or most likely to pay to have you resolve the problem, right? And so again, it just takes that focus off of, like retail has a lot of problems with inventory, right? There's theft, there's all kinds of management issues with inventory. This restaurant probably has a lot less problems with inventory, so I wouldn't focus on coming to a smaller restaurant, right? Their inventory is primarily in food and it's consumed at the end of the day. So they don't have as many inventory management problems, right? When you focus on pain, you also need to focus on, and you need to think about this whole process as if you are a scientist. And as a scientist that's setting out to cure cancer, you have a hypothesis. So your hypothesis is about the pain, and you're saying, these are the kind of people I think have the pain, or these are the businesses that I think have the pain. And a hypothesis is built on assumptions. And so your job as a scientist is to test those assumptions, right? And if you think as an entrepreneur, instead of as a finance person, you know that your assumptions will not be 100% correct. Like a scientist, you're starting out with what you think are pretty good assumptions, but you have to test them. And the way you test them, and one other thing I would like to say, those of you that have known me too, if you can come up with two things, a business problem and then a social problem to solve, we have what I call as a growth accelerator. So when I started the Johnsson Group, which is now such old news, the social problem I sought to solve was work-life balance, right? And I said work-life balance will, for customers, mean that they will get better service, that they will get people who are not only not tired, but are having breakthrough thoughts. And we concentrate on that all the time. What breakthrough things have you brought to your customer? What have you done that was above and beyond so that we're proving our operating model, right? And I encourage everybody to do that all the time. If you can find just one social trend to make a core piece of your operating model, it is then an operating model that's accelerated in its growth. Okay? And now step number 3 is the delighting customers. So taking, again, walking way away from what is it that I have to offer, but now you are looking to validate, and you're out with as many potential customers as possible. And for students in my classes, even in my online classes, I say you're talking to 25 potential customers a week. Right? So you think about networking and things like that. Are you talking to 25 potential people a week? When you're talking to 25 people a week about getting a job, that's kind of hard to do. But when you're talking to 25 people a week and saying, I would like to just talk to you about inventory problems because I'd like to get smarter about that, a lot more people will return your phone call. You don't have to have coffee with them. You just need 5 minutes of their time on the phone. And I saw that Larry Kaufman did a speech here, and that's out on your website. And he does a great job at telling you how you can use LinkedIn to get to secondary contacts. And when you want to ask this kind of a question, right? And this is not a survey. You want to be in the question with people because you're trying to understand two things. One, are your assumptions solid? And two, who will be your extreme users, right? That's your sweet spot. The extreme users are the people who will buy your services over and over and over again. And once you get through that first round of interviews, right? And at that first round of interviews, I look for when they've gotten through as classes that they've gotten through 25 to 100, somewhere in there, where they're just testing the problem assumptions. They're not like, hey, here's what I'll sell you. In fact, I haven't decided yet what I'll sell you. I'm holding that back. I'm saying, I want to understand what your need is, right? When you get to step number 4, and you've had that many informational interviews, you're now ready to start doing what they call in lean startup world customer archetypes. A lot of other places you'll have seen it called customer personas. And it's a fun part where you're drawing an ideal character, right? You give it a name like Frantic Franny, you know? Frantic Franny can't get her inventory done, right? You give it a name of what are the demographics, the psychographics, the purchase drivers, and the purchase occasions of that certain type of customer, right? Will they do inventory every quarter? Will they do inventory only at year end? And I'm just using inventory as a conversation piece, right? But anything like that. And you now have a new set of hypotheses and assumptions to test. Now you're going to be testing, does this demographic, does this psychographic, do these purchase occasions cause somebody to buy this service, whether they buy it in-house or they buy it outside, right, on a regular basis. I don't know how many of you know today's Dr. Seuss's birthday. But step number 5 is what I call the elevator pitch, right? And the elevator pitch is not about here's who I am and here's what I do. It's here's what my business does. My business is in entrepreneurship education, and here's all the different kinds of customers that I have, right? So your business is in whatever it is, and you've got the problem statement is up front, right? People do not know how to teach entrepreneurship, and in fact, they're losing accreditation in universities because they don't have experiential learning, and I bring experiential learning to the table for them, and I have curriculum that already is proven that does it, right? So for you guys, it's the same sort of thing. What is your problem statement? Who has that problem? That's your customer. What is the product or service? And at this point in time where I've told you not to focus on it, you're only at an assumption of what that product or service might be. And then what's the happy ending, right? Because that's really what your customers are buying. Your customers are buying that happy ending. In the Johnsson Group, it was a completed project, and we would focus on the fact that we would leave, and your organization would be better, and the project would have been completed, the acquisition was integrated, or whatever, right? And we actually left. We were not in a never-ending billing cycle, and your own people knew a whole lot more about how to do something, right? So again, that happy ending is really what the customer's buying. The happy ending is that not only have your auditors said that you've got a clean report on inventory, but now you're an example in the industry of inventory management, and your productivity has increased, and your cost of capital has gone down, or all of these different things. And I tell you, you can do an elevator pitch. I like video elevator pitches because it allows you to go in many different directions. It allows you to send that out very easily. But I tell everybody, and this is not just because I'm a dinosaur, right? But I tell everybody, draw it on paper first, whether it's an app that's a new business, whether it's your elevator pitch. And the reason is this. Does everybody, can you see this? No? If you can't see it, then it's not good. You can see it? So this is the story of Cinderella, right? Is it an accurate story of Cinderella? So some of you are shaking your heads, yes, it's an accurate story of Cinderella. You don't think it is, Philip? You're closer to it. Why is it not an accurate story of Cinderella?
Because there's a lot of gaps in it.
Right. So there's a fairy godmother that comes, right? There's no going to the ball. After you go to the ball, you turn back into rags, then you lose the slipper. Well, you have to lose the slipper while you're still dressed for the ball, right? So the fact that in 5 to 6 slides, in 5 to 6 seconds on an elevator pitch, anything like that, you have to get your story down very succinctly, and you have to get it in the right order. And that storyboard becomes your first prototype. Okay? And that prototype is a low-fidelity prototype. Most of us think of prototypes like this. High fidelity, right? Here's a brand new car that's being shown at the auto show. Here is the, the runway for fashion design, right? Those are high fidelity prototypes. And a high fidelity prototype is to be almost at market. But before you do that, you do low fidelity prototypes where you're taking one core piece of the concept and testing it and seeing, does this mean what you would need, right? And the point of a low-fidelity prototype is not, the point of a high-fidelity prototype is to showcase something. Isn't this great? Won't you want to buy a lot of these? Place your orders now, right? But the low-fidelity prototype is to co-create a solution with customers. So you're saying to them, look, we're in beta test. We're not even in beta test yet. We want to know if just this piece of the process is something that you would use, right? And when you're having that co-creation, and here's what it might look like if you're doing a product or service, right? You notice they're not only using a whiteboard, but they're using Post-it notes on the whiteboard. And they've gotten in a room with their potential customer and say, so if we did these things in the process for you, would this be helpful? What would you change here, right? And the fact that they're using Post-it notes on the whiteboard is getting people up and saying, yes, you want me to co-design with you, right? At this level, at the high fidelity level, whoops, sorry. At this level, you're not asking them to co-design the engine of the car. We've already invested several $1 million in it, right? So the low fidelity, these are some of the basic rules. Not only should it not encompass the whole idea, you don't want it to. You want to develop the simplest prototype that you can that gets to either a minimal viable product or minimal viable service, right? It's just a piece of it. It's not all the bells and whistles yet. And you don't want to include details in there that aren't being tested. So like this is an example of bleach bottles, and the bleach bottles would fall out of your hands and then splash all over and ruin your clothes, and right? So instead, they have all these different gripping functions, and that's all they're testing, is the gripping function of the container. So there's no color on it, there's no brand name on it, there's nothing else other than the core 1 or 2 or 3 elements that you're testing. And if you do that, test them in different ways, which again is why a storyboard works really well. Here's how the service is, what would you change on it? But I really like if you can get in a room with somebody and do this, right? And this gets to apps too. I don't have the app one up here, but all of my younger students, they all want to do apps. And an app is not a business, right? An app is a tool to market a business or a tool to do an operational piece of the business. And the first thing I make them do is draw it out on paper. Little paper screens that would fit on there and say, what does it look like? If you can't draw something on paper, you don't have a process yet that should be automated, right? And so the same thing with anything that you're doing from a service standpoint. If you can't draw it out on paper, you can't engage people in changing it, and you haven't really thought through all the steps yet. But when you have, and when you've gotten to a prototype that you think, and a minimum viable product that you think is something that's marketable, and you've now worked in co-design that with potential customers, the next thing you do now is take it out to the larger world, right? And that's online tests, online proof of concept tests. And when I started my first business, we couldn't do any of this, right? But now it's great. You can go and you can do 2 things, free promotion and paid advertising. And even paid advertising, like Google AdWords almost always is running a special, LinkedIn is running a special, hey, we'll give you $50 of free advertising. I limit my students to a budget of $25 of free advertising to get started. And you're not even wanting to get somebody to a website, you're just testing, are your keywords something that anybody's even doing a search on, right? And Google will work really, really hard to spend that $25 budget for you, right? One of my groups of students had a solution. They said, we don't like that when we have a new doctor, when we get a new network, a healthcare network, we have to find doctors that are in the network, and the only thing we can find out about them online is like what they look like and where they're located, right? And we'll like better information online about these doctors. And so they did all kinds of keyword searches, and they ran a basic Google ad that looked like this, all text, right? And what they found was Google showed it 29,000 times before they could get somebody to click on it. So what they concluded was they'd really hit on pain, but they had a lousy ad, right? So all of this is ways that you can test something, and now you're testing it with a much larger audience, right? Google is not going to people you only know. They're going out there to anybody, and they're trying really hard to sell that budget for you, right? And you don't have to have the name of your company or anything else. You're just testing this concept, testing these pain points. And then you move into what I call even more fun, which is you do all the things that now large corporations are doing that they stole from entrepreneurs, right? And the first is guerrilla marketing. And this is where you get out and you do something really fun, right? So these are people that were dressed as M&Ms that M&M Marge paid to go and be in Paris and get a lot of excitement just around the M&M brand. They didn't even have a new product that they were launching. They just wanted to increase awareness of this highly American brand, right? I'm on the board of the Economic Awareness Council, and when they wanted to, they had a program that they were running at the Museum of Science and Industry, and so they had all this financial literacy, and they were trying to get people to come to their booth, and nobody would come, and when they dressed up as Ben Franklin and Mrs. Franklin, all of a sudden kids would come, oh, what's going on with Ben Franklin, and they had a whole line of people at their booth, right? I had students that were looking at doing fresh food and maybe doing a fresh produce truck at things like the metro station, stuff like that. They dressed up as bananas because that was the only costumes that they could get. They showed people their storyboard, right? And they got all kinds of feedback, and they were thinking that they would put this fresh produce stand at the metro station, and instead what they found out was nobody wanted to carry it home on the train, but if they had it in certain suburban stations, they'd pick it up because they would text their spouse and say, hey, do we need anything else that I should pick up from the truck when I get off the train instead of when I get on the train, right? So that low-fidelity prototype, in addition to the guerrilla marketing, allowed them to get attention. They also said a lot of people came up to the banana suits and asked where the bar was, but they didn't tell anybody where the bar was until they at least answered their first question. Okay. And is guerrilla marketing necessary? Yes. In fact, large corporations do it all the time, and I love this one here, right? You're crossing the street, you know that that's McDonald's fries. I believe this was when McDonald's changed some of their fry recipe, right? But I had students do this who were doing a midnight munchies business. So they were only doing delivery of fast food between the hours of 12 a.m. and 4 a.m. And they were doing it in a college town where the biggest drinking problem, all the DUIs, at least half the DUIs, were coming from students. So they had the social problem, stop DUIs, they had a business problem. Most of the students were going out to buy fast food, and they did this delivery business, right? And they put this on, they put chalk signs on all over the campus, right? And said, hey, remember to call us for your delivery service this weekend, right? And so when they did the next thing that's required, a live market test, they had all this guerrilla marketing already done behind the live market test, all right? So that business in particular, they were only open a Friday night and a Saturday night for 4 hours and 4 hours, and they made $300 in profits on their live market test. Your live market test, again, is not about making a ton of money, but it's about getting somebody to actually pay you now for this minimal viable service, this minimal viable product. You're figuring out, just as I am in my entrepreneurship business, right? What can I do that's replicable? What can I do that is saleable? How many then can I find that allow me to scale this business, right? What pieces of it are very personal? What pieces of it can be automated? What pieces of it can be delivered on a larger platform, right? So your live market test is, again, and I tell students, even if you just start a lemonade stand from an energy drink that you want to do or something like that, start a lemonade stand. I still have never had a student do a lemonade stand, but they could get an A if they did a lemonade stand, right? The proof of concept is about learning the process by which you will launch a business, and it's also about trying 1 or 2 businesses that you might be thinking of launching. And along the way, you do what entrepreneurs know all the time called pivoting, right? You may not even end up at the business that you conceive. Guess what? Venture capitalists, angel investors, they all know that. They're betting on you, they're betting on your team, they're betting on your experience in the industry, right? And they're betting on that industry. So if you're going to do something in finance and accounting, they say, yeah, there's going to be even more need for all these controls. And so, yeah, we're going to bet on you in controls in the finance and accounting industry, and we're going to bet that you're going to figure it out. But what they know is that the vast majority of time, the problem that you set out to solve and the solution that you started with is not where you will be 5 years down the line. They're betting on the industry, they're betting on you, they're not betting on your problem solution, okay? Once you get to private equity, they absolutely are betting on your solution, right? Then you're a proven business, that's a whole different scenario, but angel investors in particular know most likely what you come to them with, even the prototypes as far along as you are in the development, that is not going to be the thing that gets to scale. Okay? And then the last step of proof of concept is you're taking all of this stuff that has been very much primary research, right? The only secondary research you even got to at all was the online testing. And you could have been doing some industry research and things like that to back up what you're doing, but you're now taking this and showing how it can scale, right? And you're saying, this problem I addressed with these 5 retailers in detail, or these 2 retailers in detail, but this is how many retailers there are across the country. This is how many retailers there are in the world, and here's the ways that we can get to them. And this is the beginning place where you could start doing some fundraising, right? Whether it's family and friends fundraising. I always say the hardest place to get fundraising off the ground is with your spouse, right? Because that's where they're really making a bet on your income. They're really making a bet on this business plan with you. They're making a bet on you able to do it. Then your next hardest group to get is family and friends, because they always know you as who you have been, not who you're going to be, right? So if you can get fundraising from them, and then the other thing to know is this, you can now crowd fundraise for equity. And this is not really known by many people, even though the laws first changed in 2015. And then they put even more laws in place last spring, 2016. And now you can actually go out there and if any of you are interested, just give me your email and I'll send you the whole thing from the SEC on what's allowed and what's not allowed. But it used to be that you would have to prove that somebody had $1 million in net worth before you could take their private investment, and that's all gone, right? You could crowd fundraise equity at $5 a share, or $5 a partial share if you wanted to, right? And it's all a matter of what you set up. And then there's levels, like, okay, if you're gonna take $250,000 from people, then there are requirements and stuff like that. But all you're doing at this stage is crowdfunding behind, hey, my prototype is now gonna move to the next level of test, right? I need this amount of money to get from the little stand that I set up at the metro station to now I want to invest in a food truck conversion, and I need $10,000 to do that food truck conversion, right? This is not still the whole business on a rollout yet. It's to get to that next stage before you would then maybe go to angel funding after that. Although I've had students where I've brought angel funders in to judge the competitions, and the angel investors have liked the idea so much, and they said, we've seen it so developed through this, right? And it's because I don't give an A unless they get to some revenue. And that's the whole difference, right? Once you taste that revenue, even if it's only $300, you know you can get more, right? And the 80% that fail quite often haven't gotten to revenue. So no matter what it is, I say to you, beta test it with customers and don't be afraid. Take a small, say, like when I started the Johnsson Group, I actually billed my services out at $30 an hour, right? And I knew there was no way $30 an hour would be a sustainable rate, right? But I said, I want to test, like, what kind of a project can we do, and how does a project end, and all of those things, right? And then the next time that customer wanted to hire me, it was $60 an hour. And the next time they wanted to hire me, I wasn't available, but I gave them somebody else at $90 an hour. And then I increased it to $150 an hour. And that first customer, those of you that know her, was Karen Dull, who became then an investor in the company and a board member and also a trusted client for many, many years, right? So that's basically all that I have for you. There's two things. There's an online class that I'm teaching in proof of concept where I'm now taking individuals as proof of concept. That starts April 5th. And I've been teaching online courses for teaching faculty, but it takes you through all the core stuff that I'm doing. There's also a course that I have starting at Concordia University that will be online, and it's about how to do the big idea, how to get to the big idea for a grand scale business. And that's a course that I'm under contract to design for them and then to teach, and that one starts in May of 2017. So if you're interested in following any of this kind of stuff, and then I also do private coaching sessions with entrepreneurs. I tend to do that with serial entrepreneurs. Like one of my customers has the first patented homeopathic formula for weight loss reduction. She's got 1,500 people in Mason City, Iowa that have lost 30 to 50 pounds. And she's now in medical test, and so she's already at $1 million in sales, and then I help coach her for how to get to $1 billion in sales before she gets knocked off by pharmaceutical companies, right? So anyways, though, I also have startup customers that I coach too, but you have to really be of a mindset where you can do this, right? Otherwise, I'm not worth it. You're better off taking a course or something like that, because the coaching's kind of intense. All right, so that's all I have. Questions? Yes?
Any comments on Kickstarter? I mentioned my daughter earlier. I mean, they started a business. They sold it through Kickstarter. It seems like Kickstarter kind of gives you steps 5 through 9. Elevator pitch, prototype, online test, all that you get with a Kickstarter.
Yeah, I love Kickstarter, and I have students use Kickstarter a lot. Because it at least gives you a whole platform where you can put the stuff up here and then you can have people come to it. And they take a percentage, right? But I think that percentage is well worth it, especially when you're testing this stuff. And it's easy. It's a platform you can use. A lot of people are under the assumption that Kickstarter will market your business for you. And that really doesn't happen. I mean, yes, you are in their platform and stuff, but really you're still marketing your business. You're sending out the Kickstarter link to everybody you know and everybody your parents know, and, right? But I think it's a great platform for getting a lot of the stuff up, right? Yes?
So I've got a son that's had some health problems, but now I think they've been resolved. He's out in Los Angeles, would love to be a movie director, okay? but he's getting to that age. I shouldn't say that, because you talked about 55 and 60, but is that online course, proof of concept, is that something that you would think would be good for him? I mean...
Well, that's why I've
No.
developed it for individuals, right? Like I've been
Right.
teaching it in the classroom, in face-to-face, in teams, right? But I've got a model on the East Coast that wants to do it, and I've got a physical trainer that wants to do it. So a movie producer would be pretty cool to have in it, so, yeah.
Okay, so it's just a real broad concept. I'd love to do that, but I don't know what to do. I'm probably too old, or whatever the term is.
Right.
Okay.
And you know what, you don't need a course to do this, right? I've just taken you through all the steps that are in the course. But what a course does is it gives you discipline, right? It says, okay, here's your assignment, and you get your assignments done because you're in the course. And it gives you feedback from other people in the course, right? And so the movie producer gets feedback from the model, and the accountant in the room says, hey, have you thought about this and this? And so that community build is a great way to get your business off the ground, right? Other people do not like courses because what? You are now sharing your intellectual property with other people that may or may not say, hey, that's a great idea, right? Anytime you're in a classroom, it's very, very hard to defend any sort of intellectual property, right? But people who are serial entrepreneurs like I am, right, they're like, hey, I'm going to start this idea and I need as many people on board as I can, and I tell everybody about it, right? It tends to be first-time entrepreneurs that are holding everything really close to their vest, right? In even the tech world, where things are pretty easy to steal, they're like, hey, we're the next Uber doing this and this and this, right? We're the first mover, get on board with us. Things that are your secret sauce are the things that you don't then disclose, right? So this is the thing that's very interesting about how I do the inventory. I don't talk about that, but I still talk about who are the customers, who are the people that have pain with inventory, how do I get to these customers, and the community helps you with that. So I say whenever you're in a classroom environment, realize everything you say, even if people were to sign non-disclosures and stuff like that, and I've been in universities where they have everybody in the classroom sign that, the fact of the matter is that the idea is still in your head, right? So if it's open, right? Yes?
You mentioned teaching at different universities, and like locally, what is that? I know there's a, increase in entrepreneurship being taught, but like if a particular university is doing a good job, is it at the graduate school level, undergrad? How does that landscape look?
So, and I teach inner city youth, some that are high school people, high school students, and some that are dropouts, right? I teach undergraduate, I teach MBA level. At the MBA level, some of the MBAs are at the classical, traditional, like 30-year point. Half of my class in this one place where they were all 50 plus, half of the class was 50 plus. So there are all different reasons to go at an MBA level. The things that I do at Concordia will earn you a certificate or can earn you credit hours towards a second degree. Who's the most successful entrepreneur out of those are two things that I found. One, if their back is up against the wall for some reason, those make successful entrepreneurs, right? Like if you're saying, hey, this is my best shot at getting the whole annuity that I need, getting the retirement fund that I need, and doing that in 5 years rather than another 30 years that I don't have to develop something, then I'm going for entrepreneurship, right? So the inner city youth, a lot of times their back is up against the wall, a different reason. Here's my minimum wage job that I'm looking at, I'm a high school dropout, right? Or here's hope, right? So people who have a real need to make a business work will make it work, whatever their real need is, right? It could just be, I don't want to change my lifestyle, I don't want to sell my house, right? Those are reasons that people make their business work. So I don't care what the need is, I just look for that there's a need. The other thing is that the more experience you have at something. My hardest group, really, for me to counsel for entrepreneurship are undergrad students. Because when they're just getting out and they haven't really had a lot of jobs, I would prefer that they go work for somebody as an apprentice, basically, right? Learn an industry, learn some sort of skill set that then you can turn into something marketable.
Yes, on that note, more and more colleges are offering majors in entrepreneurship. So now, as a son who, he hasn't brought this up, but I think he would be a great entrepreneur. But do I want to invest 4 years in college for him to have a major in entrepreneurship? What's the job?
So there's a number of things, and the job is this, right? So one, if you learn how to ride the bike, you could always ride the bike anytime further in life, right? But one of the biggest reasons that people are getting, where they get jobs with an entrepreneurship degree, is as an entrepreneur in a major corporation. because major corporations don't have the people who think with this entrepreneurial mindset. In fact, they're paying for a lot of, can you teach our people in-house how to think this way, how to go through these steps? And a lot of what I built into on top of the lean management stuff, like the lean startup weekend. I'm not a big advocate of starting up a business on the weekend. There's only a certain amount of things that you can do on a weekend, like a lemonade stand, right? But the processes that I have incorporated here, like those are things that corporations have been doing for a long time as they do a new product rollout, right? So there's all kinds of careers that if they say, hey, I really want to be an entrepreneur, they can still go get that apprenticeship, working for a large corporation, figuring how it rolls out. And then there's also startups are hiring people right and left, right? I still counsel if they're a good enough student, get a job at a large corporation, see how it's done on a big scale. You can always then get a job in a startup, or you can work for a startup on a weekend and things like that.
But do you suggest that they go in, put a big corporation in the marketing or product development? I mean, they don't go into the
Right.
accounting department in a big corporation.
Well, if you're going to go to the accounting department, you've got a degree in accounting. And I've had people have a degree in accounting and have a minor in entrepreneurship, right? Because they say, I want to know about business, and that's where I was. I'm an accounting CPA, right? And I wanted to figure out the money. And I have never found a business yet that I've worked in that I didn't like, you know? And I love business. So I like every industry, I like every business I've been in, and if I didn't have accounting, I couldn't talk that common language everywhere. You got a question?
Yeah, one of the risks with angel investing isn't only the business failing, but it's also the fact that the shares aren't liquid, right? You can't, I mean, traditionally there hasn't been a way to get to an exit strategy for a private investor. Has that changed since a lot of the crowdfunding rules have changed? Is there like, are there marketplaces that have popped up for more of the private equity on very, very small scale companies to be
I think a
exchanged?
lot of people thought that that would happen, but
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that it still tends to be mostly a valuation, right?
Yeah.
So I valued the shares at this amount, and then every time I get a second valuation, I am usually devaluing those shares that were before, right? So there's not a really free exchange market, although I know that that's what the regulators have talked about and what they conceive. And that doesn't mean that it might not come. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I would love to see, like, you know, a group like this say, we're gonna invest in each other's businesses. My penny stock is going to be in Wendy Katz's business, right? And so I'm willing to give Wendy $1,000 because I think she's got a really good concept. And I'm picking on Wendy because I used to work with her, right? Or I'm gonna do Otis's business, right? And so in this room, now we come up with the $32,000 because I know Otis and I know he'll be successful, and I'm willing to make that be my penny stock investment rather than some tech firm out of Silicon Valley where they're aged 24 to 35. I don't know any of them. And it seems to me that all they're doing is spending their time making bigger and bigger decks to get their valuation higher and higher. And my personal opinion is that whole unicorn market is about to bust, right? And that they've all sold each other the Kool-Aid, and if it's not a profitable business, and those of you who have known me know I said this actually in 1999, right? And I said, hey, I am not doing revenue for free, right? I am a person who follows the money. Show me customers who are actually paying and show me that you can make money doing that. And now I'm willing to invest, right? You know, so you guys are finance people. You know, hopefully I'm talking to you and you're in common language with that. And my students don't like to hear that, right? But I say, look, you might be lucky, you might get that valuation, you might get another $10 million invested in your company, but at some point in time, if you don't get, and we're already seeing that, right? We're seeing Snapchat not get the valuations that Facebook got, right? So there's always that wave, and if you're riding that wave, great for you, right? But if you're really creating something of value, and you are creating something that's a sustainable business, and we all know that that definition is a gap definition, a sustainable ongoing business does indeed have profits, right? Certainly has revenue, then you've got something that will weather business cycles and weather storms. Yes?
How do you market yourself in a niche industry? So branding, so for instance, in independent consulting in insurance or consulting in small business, you don't want to go too broad, you don't want to go too narrow. You want to speak to that a little bit?
So as a business, right, there's sole proprietors,
Yeah.
and that's what an independent contractor is a sole proprietor. And to me, there's a lot of risk in a sole proprietorship in that while you're doing the work, again, for me, when I'm doing work, I'm 150% on doing that work. And so you don't really have a lot of time to market. And then when you're not doing the work is when you're marketing, but you should be marketing when you're doing the work, right? So to me, a sustainable business, actually, an independent is more of the gig economy. I've got this gig and now I'm going to the next gig, and that's a really hard, stressful place to be. But if you can turn that gig into a series of gigs, and if you can partner with some people where now you're managing that cycle, and some are selling and some are marketing, and you've got that time in between, then you've got a business, right? So in a niche, which was your question, I say then how much of the niche is there that can sustain more than that individual? And is the branding important? The branding is important in everything. Okay, so did I answer your question?
You did, thank you,
Okay.
yes.
Anybody else? And are we at 9 o'clock?